Greetings everyone. In this video I want to show how I cultivate Grindal worms, and I will share a few tips which might potentially be useful for some of you in cultivating Grindal worms. And the reason why I think it's a bit different from what others are doing, because I'm not using any sort of a soil substrate like cocoa fiber or compost to cultivate Grindal worms. I'm doing it on sponge, and that's why I think these cultures are cleaner. They have no smell at all. So over here I've got 6 cultures. Some of them are doing great, others are so-so. I will take you through these cultures. I will take you through how I take care of them, feed them to the fish, and what I do on a regular basis. So before we get any further, I would like to clarify that this is my preferred method for a number of reasons. First of all, I think cultivating Grindal worms on a sponge is much cleaner. It doesn't have any smell. It also allows you to be a bit more relaxed with what you're doing with your cultures. I don't take care of these cultures on a daily basis. I check them on a bi-daily basis. Sometimes I check them once in 3 days. And there's absolutely no need to feed your worms, to spray them every single day, as you would hear in a lot of videos, which might be the case with cocoa fiber cultures or with compost based cultures, but with the sponge based cultures you don't really need to do that. Sometimes when I'm busy, when I'm traveling, when I have too much work, I only check these cultures once per week, which is absolutely fine. Yes, they will not breed as actively as if you're feeding them on a bi-daily basis. If you feed them only once and if you change their water only once, they will not breed as actively, and they will not be so prolific, but nevertheless they will survive, they will perform quite well. So there's no need to actually do maintenance on these cultures on a daily basis. So let's start with the first container. I'm using just the typical plastic containers which you can buy for takeaway food in a bulk, and just like others, I'm having these holes in the lid, which I kind of plugged with some filter wool to prevent any sort of flies and all other insects from getting in. So let's see, what do I have inside. Inside I have a piece of sponge. This is actually an old piece of sponge from a filter, pond filter. I used them in my sump before, and then I have the sponges left. I cut them to size. Over here I have a bit of it's kind of a piece of plastic. You can use any piece of plastic, and this is where my culture lives. I bought all of these worms as one culture, cocoa fiber based culture, and eventually I transferred them onto sponge. So I basically would move this piece of plastic with worms on it from the cocoa fiber culture to the sponge culture until I moved them all into sponge. And when I had this cocoa fiber culture, kind of the starting culture, it smelled so bad. It just reeked horribly, and I couldn't stand that smell. So that's why I decided to create this cultures on sponge. What do we have in here? We have here quite a few worms already. I usually don't let these cultures develop into something that's steaming with worms, because if there's too many worms, obviously you need to feed them more actively, and if you don't feed them very often, they will start dying down. So this is a point. Well, I didn't check this culture for 2 days. It's 3rd day, so I'm checking it now. Here is some food. I will show you what I feed these cultures, but here is some food, and they usually congregate around this food and on this food, on this piece of plastic. Normally what I would do, I will take this out and I will feed this to my fish, which is what we're going to do right now. So the tetras and corridors will go crazy for these worms. All sorts of small fish will absolutely enjoy them. So now I have here leftover food. you never know whether they will eat all of the food that I'm feeding them, so there is some leftovers. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to wash it out under the tub to clean it up. After that I will spray this piece of plastic with filtered water, because I don't want any sort of chlorine or chloramine from the tap water to get into the culture. So I will spray it around just to make sure that it's all covered by filtered water. I will put it back, and then I will do something that I'm calling changing of water. So I will pour all the old water that is here on the bottom of this container into the sink. Normally it's quite easy, the worms will not fall out because they are usually quite attached, they are firmly attached to the sponge, so you can do it safely, and so the water is out. At this point I will spray the culture again with filtered water. So I will just spray it quite generously, because Grindal worms, they enjoy wet conditions, they like to be in wet conditions, they don't want to swim in water, so I make sure that there is not too much water on the bottom. You can see that you can hardly see anything, but there's plenty of moisture, plenty of water drops on the sponge itself, and this is what you would normally want to achieve. So now to feeding. This is a kind of a clean container, well, I mean the clean piece of plastic, and I will add food to it right now. So I definitely don't like feeding my Grindal worms with dog food or cat food. And actually, when I received my first starting culture, it came along with some dog food, and I don't like using dog food because it takes really long time to decompose. It will cover with fungus earlier than the worms will actually consume it. Dog food smells, and I don't think it actually has all the necessary nutrients for the worms, and especially for the fish which will eventually feed on those worms. So what I'm using, I'm buying the cheapest fish flakes. In here I have these goldfish flakes. This is the cheapest I could get. That's probably only available in the UK, but I'm sure you can find something similarly cheap in your country. This is basically kind of a bulk container with really cheap goldfish food. Previously I was buying cheap tropical flakes, but this is actually cheaper, and I don't think it's any worse than tropical flakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of this flakes. This is just regular flakes, and I will add them in here. Well, this culture is moderately prolific, so there is a potential for these worms to consume all of that. Some cultures I would feed more, other cultures I would feed less, and I'll show you some other cultures in a moment. So this is what I would normally add into this culture once in 2 or once in 3 days. To make those flakes a bit more digestible for the worms, I will slightly spray them with the same filtered water, and that's what it is for now, and I'll close it down. Let's move on to the next container. I'll show you some other containers without wool in here and what's happening in there, because I think it does make a difference a bit. So quite a lot of worms in here as well. You can see all of these are worms, and now I'm going to feed them to my black water tank with cardinal tetras. So let's do that right now. Unfortunately, I didn't record audio for this following few minutes of this video, so I will add an additional audio while I'm opening this next culture. So what I was saying there is that this is one of the cultures which doesn't have holes covered by filter floss, and as a result you can see that there's some mites living inside of that culture. You can see these white dots on the culture. they're not necessarily harmful to the culture, and my fish actually enjoy feeding on those mites. So I would just take out this piece of plastic with mites on it and some worms on it. I would feed it to my fish, and they will consume it quite happily. And so I don't personally mind these mites living there. I don't know whether that's the case because of the lack of protection on the lead, and that's the reason why mites penetrate these cultures. But that seems to be the case in this particular culture. So maybe this is something to consider if you don't plug the holes on your lead with filter wool. Let's have a look at another culture. This one is certainly a more prolific culture with lots of worms on it, and they've consumed most of the food that I've given them. They just congregate around that food, and there's still some food that is left, and they would probably continue feeding on it, but because there's quite a lot of them in here, I will try to feed them to my fish, and I will add more food onto this culture. It was close to develop some mold on it, but so far so good. So we can feed it to the fish now. Right, let's open one more culture just for the sake of demonstrating the difference. Well, this is one of the cultures that I had for a while, and it's not very prolific culture. You can see there are some worms in here. Probably I fed it last time, but they didn't breed as actively as in a different culture, which I showed you a moment ago. So that's when I see something like this. The only thing that I will do is I will change the water on this culture, I will add more food, I will spray it with water, and I will close it down, because there's no point of feeding those few worms that are in here, because, well, I'd rather have this culture develop further before I will deplete it. In the conclusion to this video, I will show you where I actually keep my Grindal worm culture. So they are here on the floor in my fish room. The ambient temperature in this room is 22 degrees Celsius, but I would say probably down there it's a bit cooler, but nevertheless it's probably no lower than 20 degrees Celsius. So Grindal worms seem to do quite fine at this temperature, and as you can see they're breeding, and I've had these cultures here for 6 months at least, and everything was going well. So basically that's the end of this video. I hope it will help you to create your own smell-free and low-maintenance Grindal worm cultures, and you would enjoy feeding these worms to your fish, and without having to stress out with the smell, and without having to think to feed them or to take care of these cultures on a daily basis, as we are often advised in quite a lot of other videos on how to maintain your Grindal worm culture. So in any case, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and do like this video, and there will be more videos to come about other fish and creatures in my fish room.